Welcome to Positive Talk with Kevin McDonald. Hey, that's me. Hi, and welcome to Positive Talk. Our show features the best positive stories and people from around the globe as we endeavor to answer the universal question of why am I here and what is my purpose? Understanding that can change everything, and knowing your greatness is fundamental to living your best life. So join us right now as together we work to create the adventure of our lifetime. And welcome to the show, everybody. My name is Kevin McDonald. Rochelle's going to join us in a little bit, hopefully, that the creek don't rise and all that kind of stuff. We've got a great author for you today to talk to, and I guarantee you that if you walk into a bookstore, or you go to a library, or you, in some cases, even go to the airport in their bookstore, you'll find his titles. His name is Gary E. Parker. He's a Ph.D. But you know, his story is so much more than writing 20 books over 20 years and having a wonderful wife and a couple of kids. You know, he started from a place of, if you ever saw the movie Deliverance, he grew up in that neighborhood. Because
close to it, yeah.
his mom and dad, when they were alive, they had an 8th and 7th grade education. He's the first member of his extended family to actually go to college, let alone get a PhD. And so he's done a whole lot of things in life, and proving that life is just a journey, going from one thing to the next. He was he loved to read. He loves to read, and I'm going to ask him. Well, first of all, I want to welcome you to the show, sir. How are you?
I'm doing well, Kevin, and thank you for your time. And I want to say, as we begin, I love your mission. I love your intro, you know, finding what you're here for and finding meaning and purpose in life and living life with joy and fulfillment. That's a great mission, and I really appreciate your program and how you do it. So glad to be with you.
I'm very thankful, and I'm very grateful and very lucky. I've had I got to interview some wonderful people, including this guy. I don't know if you know him. He's an author. His name is Gary Parker, and he's written 20 books. He's got a couple of screenplays. He's actually even sold a screenplay, which I've talked to a lot of people who've written screenplays, and they're hard to sell. And so I'm really thankful that you're here and to talk about everything that you've done in your life. And how did it all start for you? I know you loved reading as a kid.
Yeah. And, you know, when I was a kid, as I said, my parents didn't have a lot of education coming out of Appalachia, but my dad read books all the time. And I don't think I can remember walking by his bedroom at night when he was going to bed and I was going to bed. He would always have a book in his hand or about to grab a book to read. And so in some ways, I say that words created me. Now, a lot of other things came into play with that, but from that, watching my dad read, I started reading very early. One of my prized possessions as a kid, I was I played sports, I went to school, and I read books. And my library card, back then you had to have a card, and you walk into a library, and every week or 2 weeks, I would walk a couple of miles and this is when I was 7, 8, 9 years old, and go to the library. So reading those books created in me a desire, I guess you would say, to get education, to see the world, because I could go in those books and I could meet new people. I could meet famous people. I could travel, all those things in the books that at that time in my life, I was not able to do. So that's kind of where it began, that seedbed of enjoying reading that later on led me to think about, well, you know, maybe I want to do some writing. So that was kind of the start.
Well, and, you know, and in referencing your dad who loved to read, I'm a firm believer that while you may not have a lot of schooling as far as education goes, that if you are an avid reader, that you gain a lot of information and a lot of education through that, don't you think?
Oh gosh, yeah. In fact, I would, you know, reading to me is fundamental to all of life. And as I said, when I would pick up a book, I could meet famous people. As I love sports, I played sports, and I read through a series of stories about Willie Mays and Mickey Mantle and, all these baseball players, because that was my favorite sport at the time. And so as I grew up, you read, I read widely everything from Shogun and John Steinbeck and Pillars of the Earth and all of these great novels that they broaden your perspective. And I grew up in a small mill town, Greenwood, South Carolina, and reading broadened my perspective to know that there was more out there. Not that there's anything wrong with Greenwood. It's a wonderful southern town, great families, great school systems, and all that. But I learned there was more than that. And that's one of the things that reading can do for you. It takes you from your world, transports you really wherever you go, wherever you want to go in that story.
That's one of the most important things, I think, is that not to limit ourselves, because so many of us, because of where we grew up, okay, it was a small how many people lived in that town?
Well, when I was growing up, I think it was like 15 or 16,000. It's probably 20 or 24,000 now. I sort of don't know exactly, but that's where it was at the time.
Yeah, but in those days, everybody knew your business, and you knew everybody else's business.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's if you don't limit yourself to the confines of a small town or your own imagination, if you let those things be free, you can accomplish amazing things in this life.
Yeah, you really can. And just, it's fascinating in Greenwood. And as I said, I played sports. I played baseball, football, and then later on soccer, as it was just kind of coming into the South in a way. But like, I worked at a textile mill at one time. I'd go to school, I'd go to baseball practice, and then they would allow you in that little town to work a half shift in the textile mill. So I would work from 8 to 12 in the Greenwood mill system, and I could earn enough money then to have a car and have a date with a girl and do some of those kinds of things.
The important things in life.
Yeah, the important things in life, and buy clothes. Because again, I was sort of, I became self-sufficient pretty quickly because I did get a job, etc. So those small towns, because we did know everybody, if you were an athlete in that small town, you kind of, they would say, okay, we got to take care of this person because he plays baseball for the high school team, or he plays for the American Legion team. And so that small town sort of wrapped you up and would take care of you in a lot of ways that hopefully bigger cities do too. I live outside of Atlanta now. I'm not as versed in what they do or wouldn't do, but those small towns can be that way. And I value that heritage of that town. And it's important to me that, it was an important place and still is.
The importance of small towns in America, I don't think can be overstated, because, when you've got a small town like that and you're a baseball player and you're on the high school team, people follow you. In the big cities, it's not really anywhere near that way.
Yeah, certainly in bigger cities, as I understand it, again, I live north of Atlanta, it's a more localized kind of thing. You have your little corner of the world and you live in that. Small town, all of that town is your corner of the world. And certainly that way. And, in this most recent book I wrote, the playbook, it's set in a small town. And a female becomes the head coach of the football team. And so you can imagine what reverberations that would have in that kind of setting.
And the name of the book is The Playbook. And in a small town, I can't imagine. And the character in this book breaks the glass ceiling, because especially to coach a high school football team and to be a female to boot, that just isn't heard of.
Yeah, it's certainly not. In fact, I did an AI search and asked ChatGTP how many head female football coaches there were in high schools in America. And I wonder if you want to guess how many there were. Take a shot and I'll give you the answer.
I would venture to guess maybe 2.
You're exactly right. You're so smart, Kevin. I didn't know. You're really smart and you're a nice guy. Who knew,
Well, And you've got an 11 handicap as a golfer, which I never was able to master either. But and the reason that I said too is that it's just not done, because
Exactly.
in football, you have to be tough, you've got to be resilient, you've got to be able to yell at your players. There's an old school that involves with that, and hopefully we're evolving past that, because I think we're losing a lot of great people because we're not giving them every opportunity to become who they really are.
Yeah, and in the story, we ask. There's a blurb on the book from a woman who is a defensive analyst with the Tennessee Titans, and there are 4 or 5 of those in the NFL. I don't know the exact number now, so because it changes a little bit as you go along. There are a few assistant coaches or analysts back, not on the field, but females there. And I'm not trying to push that we ought to have half and half, female or male or anything, but I'm just trying to say, the world, if a young woman grows up, and in the story, this coach is someone who was a kicker for a small town, for a small college football team. So she had played,
Yeah.
and then becomes the head coach, because the regular head coach has a car accident, runs into a deer, which can happen a lot in North Georgia. And so the school board elevates her to become the head coach. She's an assistant, and then everything sort of unfolds from there. So, yeah, and in a circumstance like that, sometimes people say, well, you can't be a coach unless you played the game. Well, one in my story, she did, as a small college kicker. But then you go and look, and about 30 to 40%, and I've got the exact figure somewhere, I don't have it in my head, of college coaches and high school coaches are males, but they never played the game. So this argument sometimes that, well, a female couldn't be a good coach because they haven't played the game. Well, if you're going to put that blanket over a female, then you got to put it over these men also. A lot of them didn't play the game, and that's okay. You don't have to play the game to understand it and to love it and to be able to inspire a team because of it, because inspiration and leadership, that comes in a lot of different packages. And in the story, she's a former lawyer, very smart, very capable. And what I really like about Chelsea Deal, who's the person in the story, is she's very feminine, but she's very strong. And so she doesn't lose any of her femininity in order to be a strong, inspirational leader. And that's kind of the character I created in the book.
Well, I'm glad you did that, because I am very hopeful that in order and I've talked to a lot of people on the show about this, if you have a strong, decisive man, he is strong and he's tough and he's valued as that. If you have a strong, decisive female, she comes off as a bitch.
Yeah, exactly. It's real easy to happen when that is the circumstance, and it's all because of the vision we already have in our head of what a male and a female should be. And in the story with this coach, her first meeting with the team when they make her the new head coach, she says, "I care as much about you as a person as I do about you as a player." And that's kind of that's the center from which she operates. And then the story goes on to prove that, true or not. Does she really care about these kids as much as for a person as she does about them for a player? And that's one of the themes in the story, is her leadership is character-centered and it's person-centered, even as it is tough and very strong that she is as she goes through it, because she's got a lot of, there are a lot of things against her. A lot of people in town don't want her to be the coach. One of the other coaches wanted the job, thought he deserved the job, so he's sabotaging her at every turn. And so she has to be strong to overcome the adversity, and that's one of the kind of the themes in the book, is overcoming the adversity as a team out of your character center.
I can't think of anything else other than they're now starting, like in the NFL, there are a couple of officials that are females.
Right. Yeah. And there's some owners. There are at least 2 owners who are female.
Yes.
And when the owner is a female, it sort of, sifts down through the ranks.
The my beloved Seahawks have a female owner.
There you go. Right.
Because Paul Allen passed away and rest his soul, and
Right.
his sister took over. But you know, and we need to take a break. But when we come back, I want to talk more about the stereotypes that we tend to put people into. That I think as we move forward down the road, I mean, this is after all 2025.
Yeah. There you go.
You think we could get figure it out that we need to let people rise to the level that they can regardless of gender.
Right.
And I'll tell you what, and in your book, in the cover, she's a good looking woman, and that's got to even make it harder.
Yeah. Tougher in most circumstances. Yes.
So we'll be right back after this message. We're talking to Gary E. Parker. Go to GaryEParker.com, find out all about him, and buy from him some of his books. And they're all kinds of genres and stuff, and we're going to talk about that too. But we'll be right back after this. At 67 years young, I never thought I'd feel this good again. But thanks to Purium's Ultimate Transformation Lifestyle, to date, I've lost 37 pounds and gained energy, confidence, and a whole new outlook on life. This isn't a diet. Purium is a complete lifestyle change, giving me all the natural, organic, nutrition-packed superfoods that fuel my body, crush my cravings, and help me burn fat naturally without starving myself. No gimmicks, no guesswork, just a simple, proven system that works. Superfood shakes, detox support, and real results. If I can do this at 67, imagine what you can do. It's your time to feel better, look better, and live better with Purium. Let's do it now, and let's do it together. Go to www.positivetalkradio.net and click on the Transform You to get started. That's positivetalkradio.net. Transform You. And welcome back to Positive Talk with Kevin McDonald. And our guest today is Gary E. Parker. He is a author of note. And I just wanted to share this with you, Gary, because one of the people that's listening to the show right now, I've known for 60 years.
Wow.
And I've known her since she was 7 years old. She was cute as a bug back then, but she has risen to become a woman of note. She worked in Japan for a long time and in the stock market and stuff, and she transcended barriers as well. And I'm glad that there's more and more of that going on, because I remember, Gary, I played football in the early 70s, and we had drills that would not even be allowed today.
Right. Yeah.
Like there was one drill that they took the dummies and they made a little square, and one player got in and then another player got in, and your job was to get him out at any means possible.
Yeah.
Kicking, scratching, punching, anything. So hopefully we've evolved a little bit past that.
A little bit. Yeah, and we had a drill called Bull in the Ring.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, and maybe they call it the Oklahoma drill now, but the whole team would surround you. You've got the ball in the middle, and then you're supposed to break out of the ring by picking two. It's kind of like Ring Around the Rosie, only you got a football in your hand, and it's one on the team, and you're supposed to break through the line. And we did that, and gosh, we practiced 3 times a day in the middle of summer. No time limit on how long you could practice. So hopefully, we've learned a few things about health and hydration that we didn't always have back, a certain number of years ago.
When my son was playing and when he was in high school, and I went to watch a practice, and the whistle blew, and they said, "Okay, water break."
Water break. Yeah.
What the hell is that? There's a water break now?
Yeah. Back in the day, you got water maybe at the end. Because they were like, if you have to drink water, you're weak. That's a sign of weakness.
Yep.
But there's a lot of evolution in a lot of places for good things.
Well, and I really think that in the football environment, that a coach that takes an attitude of I care about you as a human being, rather than just how many yards you can get or how many tackles you can make, because that will don't you think that will give the individuals more motivation to play at a higher level?
Yeah, absolutely. And in this story, the two other main characters, one of them is an African American quarterback who comes down with bone cancer. And so they have to have a backup, and the backup is a new kid in town, a white kid with a learning disability and a mom in rehab, and he loves music more than football. And so this coach and this African American player, who's the starter, they begin to try to teach the white kid the playbook, but because he's got a learning disability, it's very difficult for him. And so this coach is really proving, her character, her love for these players. And you've got a female, you've got an African American who's brilliant and wealthy, turn the stereotype some, and then you've got this white kid. So you've got this triumvirate of different adversities, different ways of looking at life, different socioeconomic standings, and all of them coming together to try to continue to win. Because the football team is an excellent team. They won state championships and all of that. And so the leadership that the woman has, and then that the African American player has, overcoming his cancer, and then the white kid who's got so many things going against him. He's poor, his mom's in rehab, he's got a learning disability, he can't learn the playbook. And at one time he runs away. He quits the team and leaves to go try to start a music career because he loves music. And so the coach, again, proving who she is as a leader, she basically leaves the school, tells the principal she's got to go find him. And of course, they got practices. They've got a state tournament game coming up. And she leaves all of that to go try to find this kid who's left town because of all the problems that he's got that he can't seem to overcome.
I gotta tell you, Gary, you are a writer extraordinaire. How do you come up with some of this stuff?
Well, it's what I do a lecture that I call Stop, Look, Listen, Note, and then write. If you want to be a writer, you have to be an observer of the world around you. And the playbook, this particular story, during COVID, I was watching college football. I'm a huge college football fan. And they had Vanderbilt had a female come over from the soccer team because they'd had something happen with their kicker. And this female kicked an extra point. First time it had ever happened at a major college setting. It had happened in smaller schools. And so for a while, that was kind of a major conversation piece. So I started thinking, well, what if there was a young woman who loved football and, can't play professionally, for all the physical differences, but wanted to stay in the sport? What could she do? And so that was kind of the ignition point to ask those questions. So the motivation or the idea, the inspiration comes, one, I'm observing, I'm watching this, and then I'm thinking, who is this woman? Why would she do this? A lot of people saw it as kind of a publicity stunt, and it probably was a little bit at the time. But then I just said, okay, what if? What if she graduates, she wants to stay in football? What would be her options? And so I said, well, what could she be a coach? And so that began to, and then the churning starts in my head, and the what if start in my head, the sausage making starts in my head. And then I said, okay, what kind of adversities would she face if she was a coach? Where would I set her? Who would be her players? What would be the problems for the players that could arise? And so the origination of the idea was watching a college football game, seeing a young woman kick an extra point in major college football. And I thought, what could she do if she loves football enough and wants to make a career out of it? And so every book I've written has been there's some what I call an ignition point. So it's stop, you have to be paying attention. In other words, you have to stop long enough to be an observer of life. Look, listen, note. That's really important. You see something, you hear some dialogue, you hear somebody talking in a coffee shop, you got to note it, you got to get it down somewhere because you will forget it or can forget it. And so once you stop, look, listened, noted, then you can begin to write. So the origin of my ideas is what I see and hear in the world around me.
It's interesting to hear you talk about that because I interviewed a gentleman not too long ago. His name is Jack O'Hallahan. I don't know if you know of him. He was a professional boxer at the same time as Muhammad Ali
I've
and
heard the name. I remember the name. Yeah.
yes, and others. And he also then became an actor and was in Superman and Superman 2. And I forget the name of the movie, but he was telling me about the time that he had a small part in a movie, and there was another actor there that had a small part in the movie. And because of his notoriety as being a boxer, this gentleman kept incessantly asking him questions about boxing and about his style and about how it worked and all of that stuff. That gentleman, his name is Sylvester Stallone,
Oh,
who
really? That's amazing. Yeah. There you go. Well,
so he did exactly what you were saying. He
yeah.
was listening and he was asking questions and he was formulating all of this in his mind. And
Yeah.
so that in part, there were other parts, but that in part led to him creating the screenplay for Rocky.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the kind of thing that happens. And at the time, he was a nobody. You know,
He was beyond a nobody. He had to sell his dog.
oh, I didn't know that, but I knew he was okay. That's below nobody. There's nobody, and then there's subtract from nobody, and that's where Stallone was. Yeah.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, the story goes that he sold his dog for $20 so he could get something to eat. And then after Rocky came out, he went to get the dog back, and the guy charged him $2,000.
Yeah, well, that's entrepreneurship. Good for the guy. Yeah.
Exactly. But that just goes to show you don't know where those moments, those
Yeah.
nuggets are going to come from.
Yeah. I used to keep a yellow legal pad by my bed because at night there's a time in your sleep pattern where you're a little bit awake, but your consciousness creates things that you wouldn't create if you were awake. Your mind is relaxed enough where those brain waves act. And I would have something hit my mind, and I'd flip on the light and grab the legal pad and write it down. Now I just do it on my phone. I email myself. I keep my phone beside my bed. And when one of those ideas comes, or one of those thoughts comes, or one of those character traits comes, I roll over, I grab my phone, I create an email to myself, email myself, and then in the morning I look and see what I emailed myself the night before. So you have to note it, get it down when it happens in your head, because a lot of times it'll disappear on you.
Now, I've interviewed a lot of musicians and a lot of poets and a lot of authors and songwriters and stuff, and they all tell me that there is a moment in time when something will come to them that they have no earthly idea where it came from, and they will take that and they'll use it. Paul McCartney, as a matter of fact, wrote yesterday when he woke up with a song in his head. Does that ever happen to you where, and I know if you've got a pad of paper by your bed, that ideas come to you in the middle of the night and you're not even sure where they came from?
I can attest to that, and this is slightly off the writing of a book, but it's on the writing and the ideas that come to you. My mother-in-law, who's 92, she recently at one point asked me to do her eulogy, which is kind of an unusual thing. But when she passes, she's 92 and in still good health for 92. And I swear, I woke up in the middle of the night and her eulogy was in my head. And it was word for word in my head. And the next morning I told my wife, that's my mother-in-law's daughter, obviously, and I repeated it back to her. And so, and that's just one example of something that I knew exactly what to say about her, and I got up and wrote it down. And I could name other examples of that where, again, your mind's working all the time. When we don't know it, it's kind of like a river. There are things under a river that you don't see, and they're moving around. And I see that as the way the mind works. The mind is moving, and there's a surface that you might see it moving a little bit when you're awake, but underneath it, all kinds of things are churning around. And so you just have to be attentive enough to let what that is break through and not have so much other crap in your head that there's no space for that to break through. So I'll stop there from using the word crap. There is so much stuff in our minds. We have to clear it sometimes.
You can use crap. That's okay.
Okay.
You can't use the S word, but you can use crap.
No, I'm good then. Yeah.
By the way, we're talking with Gary E. Parker. Go to GaryEParker.com and find out all about him. And please buy a book or two from him. And I highly recommend the playbook. I haven't read it yet, but I'm going to have to, because I imagine at some place in that story, there's going to be something about disgruntled townspeople because they have, dare I say it, a female coach. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Brushwood Media Network, the best in syndicated talk, news, and entertainment shows.
As you go about your daily life, look closer. As you gather with family and friends who love and support you, look closer. There are youth right in your community who don't have the home, warmth, and healing you have. So look closer. Every year across America, a staggering 4.2 million youth are homeless or trafficked. And for 50 years, Covenant House has worked relentlessly to keep them safe and protected. Tonight, 2,000 young people will sleep safely in a Covenant House bed. And tomorrow, they will wake up surrounded by love. They get clean clothes, hot meals, medical care, and a safe place to sleep. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. In sites across America to help them fulfill the great promise of their lives. So look closer at Covenant House. To help or get help, go to covenanthouse.org.
And welcome back to Positive Talk with Kevin McDonald. We've got a great author for you today. His name is Gary E. Parker. He's got 20 books out and 3 screenplays, one of which I think you said that it's sold. Can we talk about that? And then we'll get back to the parents' reaction to a female football coach. I'm sure it was quite interesting.
You bet. In the screenplays, I started writing screenplays several years ago. I just kind of wanted to break from a novel because I'd been doing that so long. I wanted to see if I could kind of do another art form. And so I had written a historical screenplay on the Civil War, out of a true story out of the Civil War. And a producer had read that and came to me and said, hey, I've got a story that I need a screenplay for. Would you write it for me? I really like what you do. And I wrote it, and he said, yeah, I really want to buy this. He bought it. He hadn't gotten it on screen yet, and part of it was COVID. COVID hit right in that time frame. And as we know, Los Angeles pretty much shut down during that time. And then I've had the Civil War story that was also optioned. And then I had another script that was optioned as well. So screenwriting is a totally different format to write. And in some ways, it's more direct in the sense that there's no interior, you don't learn what a person is thinking. The only way you know what they're thinking is by showing them to do it or by having dialogue. So you don't have, in a novel, you have inner dialogue, inner thoughts, and all of this. In a screenplay, just more boom, 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 boom. What's the action? What's the dialogue? What's the action? What's the dialogue? So it's something I've enjoyed doing, and I've had some success. Again, I haven't gotten anything on screen, but people have paid me for both option and the screenplay. So to that level, it's been successful. And I actually am talking with a production group now about making the playbook into either a movie or a series like Friday Night Lights, with that kind of tone. Only you got a female coach, and you're changing, it's obviously a more modern version of something like that. And I have a conversation. We're supposed to meet next week. They recently read it and said, hey, we really like this. Let's talk about what we need to do to get it on screen. So, and by the way, if you know somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody, then Kevin McDonald becomes part of the deal. And you know what you call that? The person who connects this person to that person to that person. That's an executive producer. So
Oh,
or
is-
either that or they give a lot of money. That's another way to become an executive producer.
well, and by the way, did you know you didn't know because I haven't told you. I am an executive producer of a song that was done for.
Yeah.
Do you remember "Wind Beneath My Wings"?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
There's a group called Sisters J, and they just redid that, and I helped them financially do that.
Good for
And
you.
so I'm now the executive producer of "Wind Beneath My Wings." I like
Super.
doing that.
You got a personality for it, that's for sure.
Well, and you know, and I wanted to tell you because your screenplay has been sold, but it hasn't been made. There's another story of a screenplay that was taken from a book and it was bought by a guy. He didn't know what to do with it. It was bought by another guy. He
Right.
sat on it for 10 years. His name is Clint Eastwood, and the movie was Unforgiven.
There you go. And Unforgiven is one of the classic best movies ever, and certainly in terms of the Western genre, it may be at the top. That with Searchers with John Wayne that was done, several decades ago. Two of the best, maybe the best Westerns ever done.
I agree wholeheartedly, and he didn't. And the other thing is, I was listening to an interview from one of the actors, and he was saying, typically what happens when you have a screenplay, and I hope this doesn't happen to you, but the producer gets a hold of it and they make changes, and then the director gets a hold of it and they make other changes, but they do it in different colored inks. So at the end of the day, the screenplay looks like a rainbow because so many changes have been made.
Right.
Unforgiven was done as written, verbatim.
Yes. Wow. Yeah. Well, and the original screenplay, most of the time, not all the time, but most of the time, it becomes a collaboration.
Yes.
Because once you sell it, and what I would want to do, and I do have this agreement with the LA producer, is when he gets to a point where he has the funds and ready to go do it, I will be hired as a script consultant, which means I'll be on set and I'll have a part of that conversation so that it's not just, okay, you take my script now and you go do whatever you want to with it. But you take my script, I'm on set, I'm a consultant, I'm working with you so that, if you want to take my main character and make that person something that they're not, then I have the right to say, well, wait a minute, that's not the story, kind of thing. And, sometimes you get that right and sometimes you don't. You have to decide going in, if you're going to give up that right, then what are they going to pay you for it? To let them go do whatever they want to with it.
Exactly. And by the way, I got to ask you, because you were a graduate of Furman University, got a Ph.D. from Baylor, 25 years as a minister, and then 15 years in financial services. And then you became an author. What a life you've had.
Well, I tell people it just shows I can't keep a job.
I say the same thing.
Yeah. But, it's interesting now. People change careers, not just jobs, but careers. And I don't have the exact statistic in my head, but it is surprising what that statistic is, because people do change, not just jobs, but careers fairly often now. And, my changes were changes that, there's a certain versatility in me that those changes show. You go from being a congregational pastor, and then you become a financial advisor, financial services, a CFP, which is kind of in the financial world is kind of the equivalent of a CPA. And doing that for right at 15 years and been writing through all that, you have to have some left brain, right brain versatility. And I've done a good bit of reading on that. And so, I just was curious about things and I left church life simply because I tell people I wasn't burned out. I was kind of bored out. I'd done it for 25 years and I kind of wanted to see if I could do something else. And I took some time off. I wrote another book. I decided I didn't like just being completely solitary, which writing is completely solitary.
Right.
I had a friend in the financial services industry and said, hey, you've always invested. And I had always invested. And he said, you like that kind of conversation? He said, you ought to look at this. So I did. And lo and behold, I ended up being a vice president with a large financial services company, and had a big time at it. It was a great gig, and then I retired. I said, enough of that day job. I want to just, I want to write. I want to play golf. I want to hang out with my wife and grandkids and kids and travel some. And that's kind of what I've done.
So you would have to say then that you've led the life that you wanted to lead because you did things kind of like that old Frank Sinatra song. You did it your way, and stuff, and you really did. What advice do you have for somebody who may be at year 2 of being in their job for 35 years ago for them, and they're looking forward for the next 35 years? What advice would you give them to lead their best life so that they're not just sitting around doing nothing?
I would say a couple of things. I would say, don't put limits on yourself. Keep yourself positive about what you can do. We all learned that there's certain things like, I couldn't be an NBA player, as a kid. I was a good athlete, but I wasn't, 6'9". So there are limits, but I would say don't limit yourself until the reality of it, limits you. So I would say, keep your mind open as to what you might want to do, and then follow your curiosities. I hear follow your passion, and I like that, but I think even better than that is follow your curiosities, because passion will take you so far, and then sometimes you bump your head up against, like, I wanted to be a professional baseball player at one time, and I was 6'3" and weighed 160 pounds. So I was tall enough, but I was too skinny in some ways. So follow your curiosities. So the writing was a curiosity. Can I do this? I don't know, but I don't want to limit myself that maybe I could. So follow your curiosities, and don't limit yourself. And then I would say, don't be afraid of learning the new thing, because you might think you want to do something else, but you've got to go through and learn some of that. I'll give the example of writing a screenplay and a novel. Both times before I set out, I thought, well, I want to write a novel. And then I thought, I want to write a screenplay. Well, then I spent maybe 6 months reading books, articles, listening to, experts on how to do that. Because if you don't go learn, you try to write a screenplay, but if you don't have some of the basics down, it's 3 acts with an inciting incident, with a turning point somewhere between 25 and 27 pages, with a midpoint at about 55 to 65 pages, with a conclusion, with the darkest moment at about 90 pages. And so you can follow curiosities, but then if you're not willing to go and study and learn how to do what you're curious about, then you also run up into, well, it's hard to succeed if you don't know what you're doing, even if you're passionate about it. So be open to learning, regardless of how young, old, or in the middle you are.
Now, I'm just curious about this because I just don't know. I've never written a screenplay. And it's like in a stage play, there's blocking that has to be done, and everything prepares for the blocking. In the screenplay, are you also setting up the environment and the building and where they're at, and then doing the blocking for each character within the screenplay? Is that also part of that process?
No, the director does the blocking. You leave the director, that's his or her job. What you do is you set a quick scene, okay, and you have the heading interior or exterior, INT or EXT. Then you're inside a building, concrete walls, water dripping from the ceiling, man sitting in the middle of the room, a hood over his head, 2 bad guys surround him, punching him in the back and face. Well, all you're doing is giving the short, it's almost a staccato. Here's the action. Setting is very short. You give them enough to say, okay, this guy's in bad shape. He's in a concrete room. Water's dripping from the ceiling. He's in there by himself in a chair. He's got a hood over his head. These 2 other guys are there and they're punching him. Well, immediately this is tough. This is a tough situation. But the blocking, you don't say they step to him and hit him. You just say they're hitting him. So the blocking is the director's job. You're telling, is it inside, outside? Is it night or day? Where are they? What are they doing? That's kind of the job of of the screenwriter.
Yeah, and the in a concrete building with water dripping from the ceiling reminds me of one of my apartments I had once.
Yeah, yeah, I could talk about that too. When I got out to Baylor, in my first rental was like a 4-room house, and I walked in and there were spider webs all over the place and roaches on the floor, and I called the owner of the place and I said, "Look, man, I can't live here. You got to clean this up." And so, yeah, not all of us have been there, but if we weren't born to a certain level of socioeconomic situations, we've probably been there.
And there may have been black widow spiders in that room and in that house when you were there.
Possibly, who knows? I was in Texas. That's when I went out to Baylor to do doctoral work. Who knows what there was? Might have been a rattlesnake, might have been a scorpion. A lot of things can get you in Texas.
And you want to know why I live in the grand state of Washington in the city of Seattle? It's because we don't have any of those here. Thank you very much.
Yeah, that's good. Good for you. Good for Seattle.
Yes, although it does rain here a lot and it's just miserable. Don't move here. Everybody, it's just miserable.
Yeah.
But by the way, we're talking with Gary E. Parker, and go to GaryEParker.com and find out all about him and his work. We need to take just a 30-second commercial, and we'll be back with more with Gary in just a minute. So please stay with us.
When the game is on the line, championship teams know the game plan. They communicate and work together to win. We all need a game plan to protect ourselves online. Talk to family and friends so they know how to stay safe too. Create strong passwords, turn on multi-factor authentication, update software, and recognize and report phishing, because online safety is not something you want to fumble. Get more game-winning tips at CISA.gov/secure our world. Then share them with family and friends.
And welcome back to Positive Talk with Kevin McDonald. That's me. Hey, that's me. Hey. And I had to play that commercial, Gary, because it was a foot the ball.
No, I saw that. Yes, I saw it. That's great.
And Gary has written it. And is the playbook is out, right? How long has it been out?
It came out right before Christmas, so it's been out 4 months and it's doing well. It's gotten Publishers Weekly gave it an editor's pick review. The American Library Association gave it a great review. So we've gotten some fantastic reviews for it, and it's doing well.
Does that must, and I asked you before the show, and I'll ask you again, it must make you really proud to walk into a store and to see a book with your name on it that you've worked so hard on.
Yes, Kevin, it is. And as I mentioned to you earlier, next to my marriage to my wonderful wife and the birth of my 2 fabulous daughters and my 3 grandsons, next to those experiences, this is kind of the seminal high point of life in a lot of ways. When you look back on your life and say, okay, when did it feel just the best ever? And walking into a bookstore is kind of a transcendent moment in a way, and seeing your book there and realizing that the fruit of that work that you did, because you can't write a book unless you work. I had a guy tell me when I first talked about writing a book, he said, well, the only way to write a book is put your butt in a seat and write a book. And that's, you have to do the work. And so walking into a bookstore, seeing that book on the shelf, and writing is I call it words are forever. And somewhere when you're moldering in the grave, your book is on a library shelf somewhere, or it's online that people can go read it. So it creates a kind of a legacy for you.
Yes, it does.
It's important and something that I enjoy thinking about.
Well, and writing is an art form unto itself, because when I read a good book, I'm so entrenched in the story, I can actually picture in my mind's eye as I'm reading the picture of how I'm envisioning the character to look, where they're at, the situation that they're in. It's almost like watching a movie if you get so invested in it. And you write in a way that it's easy to do that for people.
Well, thank you. I like to think I do. And that's sort of the goal when you start, is to write in a way that someone can immerse themselves in there. And then they can see themselves a little bit in the characters. Because, if you write something that doesn't touch on where people are, whether that's a grief, that you find out your son's got bone cancer, whether it's a joy when you just win a football game, whether it's a kind of a struggle as you're overcoming adversities. Those things are universal. And so you want your story to immerse your character to the point where when that character feels that emotion, good, bad, or indifferent in that emotion, that the reader also can feel that a little bit. And when you can do that, then you have you've succeeded as a writer. When you can make the reader feel the same thing which that fictitious character is being described as feeling. And that's really your goal, is to help people feel emotions that are universal. So
now, I know you were a pastor for 25 years, and so you wrote lots of sermons and did lots of things like that. Did that help you learn how to write and be an expressive writer like you are?
You know, it double teamed each other, because being a writer made me a better speaker, preacher, orator, and being a preacher, orator also made me a better writer. Again, because in both things, you're trying to tell a story that connects to somebody, that touches them at some point in their lives. And, you know, if you've got a member of the congregation who's struggling with grief, and you and your message as you're speaking that day can touch that emotion and help them find even if it's half a step out of it or half a step through it, then you've done your work there. And so the two things kind of flow in and out of each other. And one thing about being a pastor, I had a mentor once say that as a pastor, Sundays come with increasing regularity. And so you have to be disciplined if you're going to get up and speak on Sunday morning. And, you know, I pastor churches where we'd have 800, 900, 1,000 people, not a mega church, but a good sized congregation. And I used to say, you know, I may preach a lot of bad sermons, but it's not going to be because I didn't prepare beforehand. And so having to do that preparation creates a discipline in you, because Sundays do come with increasing regularity. You know, every week it's happening. So it creates a discipline, which helps you as a writer to know that, again, you have to be disciplined. And I have a lecture I do called How to Write a 450-Page Novel When You Have a Full-Time Job and a Family. Because one of the things you hear all the time is, well, I want to write a book, but I don't have time. And so my statement is, you don't have time to write a 450-page novel, but you do have time to write 10 pages a week for 45 weeks. And if you do that, at the end of it, you've got a 450-page novel. So it's a discipline is what I'm talking about there.
How do you remember on day 30 what you wrote on day 2?
Well, all I can say is the story becomes so personal to me that it's like I talk to that friend in that book. That character is my friend or my enemy. The antagonist may be my enemy, but that character is my friend. Well, do I remember what my friend is doing if I haven't seen them? Let's say I'm writing on Monday and I don't get back to it on Thursday. But on Monday, my friend, who is my character, said something to me. Well, can I remember what my friend outside the book said to me on Monday? I hope so. So, the only way I can answer it is I'm so in tune with these characters as friends, as people, as enemies, whatever they are in the story, that I can remember because they're important to me, just like my buddy might be important to me. And we had a phone conversation on Monday, and I can remember what he said on Thursday because he's important to me. You don't remember what people who aren't important, you don't remember what they said, but people who are important to you, most of the time we can remember if it's something significant.
Absolutely. And by the way, Gary's written the book, The Playbook, and it's about a female coach, which, by the way, and he did the math, there are only 2 in the United States of America on the high school level. And I wanted to ask you before we go that there has to be, because there is on every football team, the kid who isn't quite good enough to get there, and to get on the field, but his parents think he's a wonderful player, and it's the coach's dysfunction as to why he's not playing. And then then the coach has to deal with that.
Uh,
My son's high school coach had to deal with that from my ex-wife. I didn't tell her. But
Yeah.
I imagine that is also a thing.
Yeah, that's always the case of a parent who believes their kid should be doing this, that, or the other, whether it's playing football or in the orchestra or in the high school play or whatever. And that's always the situation that coaches have to deal with. And, it's human nature. Your kid is, in your mind, the greatest thing ever. And that kid is the greatest thing ever. But, there are limitations even in what a coach can do. And a good coach, hopefully, is going to be open to having conversation with that parent, having communication, so it's not just a shut down, smack down kind of thing where the parent might learn, well, my kid needs to do this better or that better. And so the coach is helping because they love that player enough, they care about that player, that they can say, look, here are things you need to work on to get better so that maybe you would have an opportunity to play more than you're playing now.
And if you're not a very good coach, you take it out on the player when your mother calls and tell everybody in a great big huddle in the middle of the field, yeah, Sean's mother called just the other day.
Yeah. Hopefully that coach won't be a coach very long.
He's not.
Or she. Yeah.
Or she, which is, and I'm so glad that you're breaking down that barrier, because it's one that really does need to be broken down. Because people are people, and I think they've got wonderful gifts, and a female coach can bring something different than a male coach can. I think into the field of play, don't you think?
Yeah, and one thing I would say about the playbook, and this is a fine line I tried to walk, because it's not a political book. It's not trying to make a statement. It's in the sense that I'm not trying to say, we've been unfair or, so it's not a political book, but it is a book that is attuned to the culture. And so you do have in this high school a female coach, African-American quarterback starting with bone cancer, and then the poor white kid. And these three people, at one point, the white kid mentions that to the black kid as they're studying the playbook together. He says, do you think this is kind of weird? We got a woman coach, you're a black kid, I'm a white kid trying to learn the playbook. He said, is that kind of weird? And the black kid says, seems to me that's the way it ought to be. And that's a great line out of the story. And so it is this different socioeconomics, different racial issues, the female issue, but it's not political. I do raise questions, and then I leave the reader to kind of deal with the questions. And that's the way I like to approach cultural. The story is attuned to a modern culture. It's not political. Nobody that has read it or done a review of it has mentioned anything that, this is political, this. But it does raise questions, which I think is something that writers should do. And then let the reader play with it in their own spirit.
And we've just got a minute left. And by the way, again, we're talking with Gary E. Parker. Go to GaryEParker.com. And Gary, I hope you'll write a book about this at one point. I'm hoping that in the future sometime that there will be three people of various backgrounds sitting in a room, and it won't even dawn on any of them that they're different from one another.
There you go. Yeah. And that's where we hope as a society we can get. And we have a ways to go. I think Obama, it wasn't original with him, but that the arc of justice is long. And this is a paraphrase. It's long. The arc of justice is long, but or the arc of history is long, but it bends toward justice. Yep. And so I think, I don't know who said that first, but the idea is that humanity, we continue to make progress, though it can be slow.
And it's kind of like driving on an old road with a lot of potholes. You got to be careful where you go, and it just takes time.
Absolutely. You bet. And I want to thank you for this time, Kevin. This has been a delight. And I want to thank all the listeners, the folks who have joined today.
And again, I want to thank you. And you're awesome. You're going to have to come back when your next novel, or you sell a screenplay, and then we can start talk about the movie and
Absolutely.
the red carpet that you're going to be on.
I look forward to that. Absolutely.
GaryEParker.com is where you go. Gary E. Parker has been our guest. He's got 20 books out. Go get them, and they're worth you getting. And again, Thank you, everybody, for listening, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for listening to this episode of Positive Talk with Kevin McDonald. Our purpose is to provide everyone with a positive, entertaining, and educational experience. I would love your feedback and comments about the show, including possible topics and great guest suggestions. Please email me at kevin@kmmedia.pro. And remember, be kind to one another because each other's all we've got.